There was a famous rabbi, Hillel the Elder, and one day as he was teaching, someone asked him, "Could you sum up the Torah while standing on one foot?" And he answered, standing on one foot, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor." Everything else, he said, is commentary. So this little episode with Jesus and the scribe wasn't unusual, because rabbis were often asked to sum up everything very succinctly to keep it fresh in people's minds and memories. But there are several things that have to be said about Jesus' reply to the scribe. First of all, what Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one," and etc. That's not original. Jesus was quoting the book of Deuteronomy, as we heard in the first reading, and also the book of Leviticus about loving the neighbor. Actually, Jewish people, devout Jews, say that prayer every morning and evening. The Shema, it's called, Shema Yisrael. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. So it wasn't original. But the love that Jesus was talking about is not what we assume, at least in the Western world, immediately as something affective. But it is something effective, as he showed in the parable of the Good Samaritan. When Jesus, or when a Jew of that time spoke about the neighbor, they didn't mean everybody. They meant fellow Jews, same family, same tribe, same clan, same village, but not the rest. But Jesus, and this is where we have to read the whole Bible, one part of the Bible interpreting the other. When Jesus was asked who is the neighbor, he told that everybody was by the parable of the Good Samaritan. But then there's that critical part of his reply which says, you must love your neighbor as you love yourself. Well, I don't know. Is that possible? Most of us have too much love for ourselves, and then there are certain few people in the community who don't love themselves enough, and that's usually a psychological problem, not a moral problem. But remember what Jesus said elsewhere. You must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. But that's impossible. That's impossible. But what he was saying is, you must be not perfect as much as your heavenly Father is perfect, or you must love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. That's not what he's saying. He's saying you must love your neighbor in the same way that you love yourself. Just as he said you must be perfect in the same way as your Father is perfect. Not as much as, but in the same way as. And that's critical. Otherwise, it's an impossible command to be fulfilled. And how do we love ourselves? What's the way in which we love ourselves? Well, I'm only reflecting myself, but I'm sure that you will identify. I am very tolerant of myself. I mean, I put up with things and you can ask the members of my community if you want to. I have lots of time for myself. I'm extremely interested in myself. I deeply desire my welfare, my safety, my security. And above all, I make excuses for myself. That's the way Jesus says you love your neighbor. It doesn't have to be this emotional outpouring. In fact, in many cases, that's impossible. because we're not all affectively desirable, at least all of the time. So when Jesus calls us to do that, he's really calling us to treat others exactly the same way that we treat ourselves. Despite everything, no matter who they are, what they're like. But then there's the other part of the commandment about loving God. Now, how do you do that? Because at least, hard as we are to love, we're there, we're present, we're visible. You can hear us, you can touch us, you can be offended by us. So, it's easy to zero in on the object of your human love. But how do you love God, whom you have never seen, you can't possibly comprehend? How do you do that? I think of people like Mother Teresa, when it was revealed recently that she spent 40 years of her life absolutely in the darkness about God. But I don't think any of us would claim that she didn't love God, because the obvious proof of that was in the way she treated the rest of humanity. So I would say to you, if you want to know how you love God, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You may have an affective experience of God. That's wonderful, but that's a gift from God. It's not something you achieve. It's the effective love that counts. And the only person you can love effectively is the rest of us. So concentrate on your neighbor. Love your neighbor, and God's love will be taken care of.